Greetings and welcome, everybody, to this week's episode of Poly Weekly News. I'm your host, David Danto, and joining me this week is my friend and industry analyst colleague, Tim Banting with Omdia. Tim, say hello to everybody. Tell everyone who you are and what you do in the industry.
Hi, everyone. Pleasure to be here. Thank you very much. So my name's Tim Banting. I'm a practice leader for the digital workplace here at Omdia. And that consists of three intelligence services, one that's focused on unified communications and collaboration, another on customer engagement, and the other one on workplace transformation. So
And everybody can tell from your voice that, you were born and raised in Brooklyn, New York, right?
There we go. Yeah. Very east side of New York. Yeah.
Yeah, east enough to be in the UK. Where in the UK are you?
I'm in a little garden city called Letchworth, which is sort of north of London and in between Cambridge. So out in the suburbs, really nice countryside, but very quick and easy to get into London. I nearly said into the office, but I don't work in the office. I work from home.
Which is kind of the subject of one of the things that we're talking about today. I know you and I have spoken many times before. We've been tracking through the pandemic this course of how working from home became the norm for nearly 100% of people during the pandemic. And then we went through these phases, the great resignation. And then we went to this, as you coined it, and I've been quoting you, the great experimentation. What kind of phase do you think we're in right now? Where are we on this journey? Are we near the end, near the beginning? What's your take on it?
We're still working it out. I think this period is the great indignation, with lots of workers saying, you're dragging me into the office and there's no need for me to be there in a number of cases. So we're seeing people being dragged into the office to attend a Zoom call, a WebEx call, or a Microsoft Teams call. And people are sort of thinking, justify my commute. You've dragged me in here. None of my colleagues are in here. And all I'm doing is sitting on a Teams call or a conference call. So there's a lot of indignation, a lot of pushback from employees. And we're seeing a number of companies that maybe feel that their culture is being eroded because you're not in the same physical place, mandating, their staff to be back in, which I think is very dangerous. If your culture is based on your location, then my words, how did we exist during the years of the pandemic?
Yeah, it's an interesting phenomenon, and I don't really want to take sides because I see all of it. And one of the things we were talking about before we started recording today was that it's not a one size fits all. There is no one answer for everybody,
Yeah.
but it is really interesting to see, especially with the HP Work Relationship Index that came out a week or two ago, that people are just not happy with the state of work nowadays. It's something like 27% of people are happy and the rest are struggling. And it's not just about the location. It's about, the honesty and the emotional integrity of employees and managers and feeling a sense of purpose. There are a lot of things missing in the world of work right now.
There is. I mean, when you think of the first office building in the world, which for those of you that love history, I'm quite interested in it. In the 17th century, 1700s in the UK, over 90% of the workforce were agricultural workers. Remaining 10% of business people were sort of lawyers and military types. They needed to convene. They had three options. They could meet in palaces, they could meet in each other's homes, or they could meet in coffee houses. Then this bright spark came around in 1722. James Barclay, who had this idea of creating an office for the Royal Navy called the Admiralty Office, and it was completed in 1726. And that was the first time, it still stands today, it's the first time that people, processes, and technology all came together in one area. But up until then, we didn't really have a concept of an office.
And for the most part, yeah, nothing had changed. It developed from the military, as you pointed out, to the oversight of the factory floor where people gathered. And we kind of just kept that model of people gathering at desks of varying sizes with varying office tools all the way through to the start of the pandemic. And only once that happened did we realize that we could send people home and companies didn't shut down.
Yeah, and what's interesting there is that there have been other sort of dip-ins to new work styles and working models. So Peter Drucker, who's the Austrian management consultant and author, coined the term knowledge worker in the Landmarks of Tomorrow book that he wrote in, or piece that he wrote in something like the 1960s, 1959. What was interesting about him was he sort of discounted this command and control management model. And he felt that companies work best when they were decentralized, as long as people can work with autonomy and with agency. So he typically coined the term knowledge worker, and it stuck. And we basically had two two work styles, didn't we? We had knowledge workers, which work from home or off the golf course, and we had office workers. And the knowledge workers were mainly the senior managers that, you know, they worked from home, and it was a privilege. And then you had everyone else that worked in the office. And then you got Robert Probst, who worked for the Herman Miller Company. And in 1964, he introduced this idea of the action office, which was modular furniture. And the whole idea here was that you could tear it down and you could rebuild it if you had a meeting that you needed to collaborate on during the week, and facilities would move all this stuff around. Unfortunately, it became the office cube because it was modular and it was cheap. And unfortunately, it wasn't designed for that. And Robert Probst, I guess he's turning in his grave. But we've had these little dips into various work styles. But things are changing. What hasn't changed, and I'm really interested in HP's survey here, is what hasn't changed is the management styles, and a lot of ways in which you provide purpose and meaning and empowerment at work. And technology is the small bit of it. You know, we've had this technology for a number of years. That's the small bit. It's the management practices, the culture, the processes that haven't really changed.
It's interesting. I was talking to another one of our industry analyst colleagues the other day about how what we haven't done for the most part globally is educate line managers, individual middle managers, how to manage a staff they're not looking at. We went through a huge a period where it was, the Jack Welch style management of stack ranking and management by walking around, and all that worked really well when everybody was in the same building. But when people are not in the same building, it all kind of falls apart. And it's not new. I was very lucky earlier in my career to manage a global staff. I can't be in the same building with every one of them all the time. I was very lucky to manage a 24/7 shift group of engineers. I can't be sleeping behind the rack and be there for all of them all the time. The skills to keep a dispersed group of employees that are on the same team homogenized and working together and working toward the same goal are there, but we really haven't done a very good job educating people how to use those skills. And I think that's probably the linchpin to all of this. That's where this is going to pop, is that people want to be working in a dispersed mode one way or another. They don't mind. They like going back to an office when there's a purpose, when there are meetings, when there are people but when they're not, they're looking for emotional intelligence from their managers and the ability to really be able to communicate and understand what their role in an organization is, and why they're doing some of the things they're doing. So it's this whole training up of managers that we're going to, I think, be living through over the course of the next few years.
I think so. And that's why I was interested in Peter Drucker. And he was sort of saying that command and control doesn't work. And I think the best thing that we can do as managers and leaders is really make sure that we've got those objectives and requirements, those OKRs, really well defined. It seems amazing to me that, millions of hours are probably wasted every year with organizations that do these annual reviews. And they get written, people spend hours doing them, they get put in a digital filing cabinet, and then they're dusted out the next year with little thought to, are our objectives aligned to what we're trying to do as a business, what we're trying to achieve. I would much rather set key objectives and say to my team, you're measured in these ways, you're going to be monitored in these ways. How you do it, where you do it, when you do it, I don't really mind. Don't give me any surprises that I can't explain to my boss. But yeah, it requires a whole different management style. And you can do that with the distributed teams. There's tools in place. There's planning tools. There's tracking tools. There's task management tools. But for some reason, we've got into the lazy thinking of, well, clearly what we're trying to achieve. You go and do it. We need it well defined. And I think that's one of the best things that we can do to improve productivity, to be brutally honest.
Yeah. And also, clearly we've learned that we don't need as much footprint for traditional offices. We can get by with less. So we're seeing an upheaval in the real estate market, certainly in the tax abatement market globally in big cities, that there are, more empty sites. And we see that what we used to have, which, at one point in the late 1990s was this concept of densification. How do I take 8 floors and move it into 4 floors and get people up next to each other in rows of desks? And that was just to save money. Clearly, we didn't need to do that. Now we need to learn about hoteling. And we need to make these places that people will want to come in. That concept that you pointed out a minute ago, the earn the commute concept, is that how is it beautiful? How does it have tools and capabilities and collaboration abilities that I don't get while I'm at home? Because if I'm sitting in front of a computer and looking at a webcam and typing on keyboards, honestly, my setup at home is better than what I would be able to get in a hotel desk. I have 5 computers and 6 keyboards and multiple monitors. It's set up for me. It's exactly the way I want it. So to come into the office, I need to have an agenda. Who am I meeting with? What's the plan? What are the facilities that I can't get at home, like a room full of whiteboards, so that we can all sit down and do kind of planning. So I think we're really in the middle of figuring all of this out right now. It's going to be a new concept of the emotional intelligence and skill set required by managers, and people are going to have to start feeling more fulfilled about their jobs. And I think the work relationship index is a wake up call to a lot of companies, because the downside of not evolving, we used to have an expression in our industry, we still do pop it up every once in a while, evolve or die. The downside of not evolving, short of death, is that companies are losing money, certainly in retention and in recruiting and in productivity and in all the other ways when you have a disengaged workforce. And people are losing, they're not spending as much time with families, they're not spending as much time on their health, they're not exercising, they're not eating right. So we've now got independently gathered data across a very large global sample that this isn't good for anybody, and that organizations at all levels, at the knowledge worker level, at the IT decision maker level, and at the leadership level, says now's the time for change. So what we're really looking for is, what is that change? And what's the direction that we're going to go in?
You're right. I mean, reinventing the office in a post-COVID world is really interesting, isn't it? How relevant is the office to the hybrid workforce? It used to be where all the resources were centrally held, the tools, the paperwork, the people, the printers. My word, how much does it cost for an ink cartridge now? If I'm going to print anything out, I want to do it in the office, but I'm not going to spend 2 hours commuting there. So what we're seeing is this remodeling of the office at the moment for activity-based working. And I think offices are going to become more club-like. I think people are going to go there for socialization. They're going to go there to do proper focused teamwork that you can't do over remote technologies such as this. And it requires a lot of thinking about, this grade A office space. That we're seeing a lot of grade B, grade C office space being neglected. People want to go into a bright office that's well lit, really nice. It's environmentally sound. It's a place that you want to go to do this sort of focused work. So we're seeing things like individual workspaces and focus rooms and collaborative spaces and huddle rooms and cafe areas and conference rooms. It's very, very different from the traditional office cube.
A lot of natural wood, a lot of plants,
yes,
biophilia, a lot of things to make the environment feel like a place you want to be.
Yeah, I think it's going to feel more like a hotel, to be brutally honest. And when we think about hotels and hotel utilization, what we're going to see is reduction in office utilization and increased floor space requirements in a number of these offices. We might even see decentralized offices and perhaps more regional hubs with access to free parking and things like that. So there's a whole sort of revolution. I think that's a fair thing to say. There's a whole reinvention and remodeling of the traditional office space, and that can only be a good thing.
And I know a number of people, certainly my colleagues, that are creating printers and computers and collaboration equipment for offices. This isn't a negative thing for them either, because while we are going to see probably a shrinking of office footprints, we're going to see an explosion of the technology, because you now need to have collaboration capabilities in every room, not just in 1 or 2 rooms per floor like we used to build in the 1980s and the 1990s. The cost of this equipment has gone down. The abilities with AI and machine learning have gone way up, and we now need to see it not just as an afterthought slapped into the floor after the architect's done, but a real embedding of the technology so that it becomes part of the natural workspace. And these are all really good things, both for end users, for organizations that are using it, and for technology providers such as HP Poly and everyone else in the space.
Definitely. And there's other areas as well, sort of adjacencies like room-based reservation systems and panels and desk-based reservation systems. If I'm going into the office and I want to meet you, David, I want to know when you're going in the office. I want to sit next to you. I don't want to be on the east wing and I'm on the west wing and we meet in the cafe area at lunchtime. If we're going to work together, let's sit together. So there's going to be a whole new sort of resurgence in these sorts of tools, the reservation systems, where people sit when they go in, all this calendaring type of capability and scheduling sort of capability, and all the panels that you see outside conference rooms in modern offices. That all needs to be thought through.
So I'll put up a link over here that lets everybody get to the HP Work Relationship Index so they can look at the results on their own. Same link that I shared last week. It's hp.com/WRI. It's really good. How does that gel with the research that Omdia that you guys are working on? If you can give us a little bit of a peek under the hood, are you guys looking at some of the same things or slightly different things and coming up with roughly the same results? Obviously, anything you haven't released, don't talk about, but kind of give us a hint if you can where you're going with this.
Yeah, sure. So a lot of your 6 core drivers align to where we're looking at, the sort of fulfillment and the purpose and the meaning that people apply to work, and leadership. We've discussed that, and this idea about having more of an employee or a people-centric view of decision making. Skills is an area that's interesting. Certainly the tools. We provide a lot of research there for a number of vendors, so the tool is but part of it. But it's really around the workplace and what's happening there. That's an area of real interest to us. There's some interesting changes coming into SEC filings where you have to justify the carbon emissions and you have to report on that. So sustainability and sustainable buildings will be a very interesting avenue to explore in 2024. But yeah, as we're seeing similar things with the with your report that you mentioned, but there's sort of perennial key themes around hybrid work. Obviously, and I'm surprised we've made it 36 minutes without talking about AI. I'm sorry, I've just mentioned it, but business insights and analytics, and maybe there's going to be stuff around occupancy levels and things like that in new office spaces. And then, of course, employee experience, which we've covered extensively on here. So that more holistic and integrated approach to all the touch points that an employee has with their employer, really. So those are the sort of key themes. But yeah, we're well aligned with what you've provided in those 6 core drivers in your index.
Good. It's kind of interesting that on 2 points that you made. One, for years, for decades, I made it a point when we were programming AV spaces that you would need to speak with the users to make sure they felt they had input. And cynically, they didn't really need to have input. They just needed to feel like they had input. They needed to feel heard and part of the process. And we cut now to decades later, and we're still talking about the same thing. Don't put tools in front of me. Don't make all of these suggestions about how I can work unless you've consulted with me and I've told you what my needs are. After that, pick whatever you like, but at least I know that I've been heard and I understand what's going on. It's amazing how that's still a driver that exists. It's human nature.
It is, and unfortunately, we're still seeing something around 35% of large organizations, their IT departments make that unilateral decision. Thankfully, that's changing. So that's going down as people start using or looking at the requirements that HR have and facilities have. But
that agency is a missed opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just too much. I mean, IT organizations have got enough on their plate without trying to second guess what's best for you or I. It seems that needs to change pretty quickly, I think.
And AI is a pendulum, in my opinion. I have a great cartoon that I put on one of my blogs recently on LinkedIn, which has a kid standing up on a blackboard by a ladder. He's scratching out the word metaverse and writing the word AI instead. It's like, yes, people have jumped on the hype train around AI because it's the latest hype train, but there are some fundamental changes taking place. We just need to understand how they're going to gel in terms of the world of work. And I don't think we know that yet. I think there's a lot of pie in the sky promises, some of which may be awesome, but we don't really know yet. We're kind of on we brought us back to tier 1 for everybody. We're all now in a learning mode. No one's an expert.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and this is what I like about your work index is you've looked at all of the different dynamics, and technology is just a subset of it. I think what we're going to find with AI is it's the big shiny object that attracts a lot of interest. To coin a Gartner term, I think we're heading very quickly into the trough of disillusionment. I think what we'll find is that AI becomes pervasive and included in pretty much everything, and it won't be a topic. It'll be a bit like WebRTC, I just use the browser now. But years and years ago, it used to be the big hot topic that everyone, jumped on. And now it's just, oh, well, yeah, that you just get that in a browser. No one really sort of cares about the underlying technology. They just understand what it can do.
Mm-hmm. So when will we hear the next releases from Omdia about what's going on, the research that you're doing? What's your calendar like?
Thank you. So we've got a similar future of work survey that my friend and colleague Adam Holtby has just released. So we're going to be providing some high-level insights on that. Of course, we're coming up to that wonderful time where it's trends to watch and our crystal ball gazing into what is ahead of us next year. So we're looking at that, and then allowing our clients and customers to guide us in the sort of research topics that they want us to concentrate on. So it's going to be a busy end of quarter. It's going to be a busy year next year. But what we are finding is that although I'm lucky enough to represent 3 different intelligence services, they're all coming together. And what is driving that is the business needs and requirements and not the technology. So that's what I find more exciting.
Yeah, everything's interconnected and interrelated to everything else. That's what we're learning. The more we look at it, the more it's the same.
Indeed. Yeah, absolutely.
So Tim, if somebody wants to get more information from you or reach out to you or learn more about what Omdia does, how would you suggest they do that?
Certainly, they can reach me directly. Actually, why not use our digital workplace at omdia.com email address? So I'll be very happy to hear from people. Let us know what you're interested in.
Terrific. And of course, they can catch you on social media, on LinkedIn, and a couple other places as well.
Yeah, and I'm one of these people that still refers to Twitter instead of X, but I'm on Twitter or X, which is at T Banting, and also through LinkedIn. So all sorts of different social media channels out there.
LinkedIn is probably a better choice. I've sort of abandoned the other site until it either gets new ownership or straightens out its moderation policies. It's not been a very happy place lately. But Tim, thank you very much for joining us. I really do appreciate it. For all of my colleagues at HP and Poly, thank you for joining us every week. We really do appreciate you joining us and spending time with us every week to hear about what's going on in the collaboration industry. We'll see you next week.